there's any noise or anything like that, I don't. You know, let me know if we could edit that part out or whatever.
No, we love noise. It adds to the dimension of the show. All right.
Awesome.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the pixeLobby podcast. I am your host, Brian Mundy, and I want to thank you so much for listening, tuning in, subscribing to the show. We got a great show for you today. First off, I want to introduce founder of the pixeLobby and co-host, Cindy Wilkerson. Hello, Cindy.
Hey everybody, I'm glad to be here again today.
Also joining us on the panel today is Micah Burke. Micah, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Just back from a wonderful trip to Photoshop World, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
where it's very hot and I'm very tired.
And our special guest, the person we'll be interviewing today, Jonathan Willner. Jonathan, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it, and thank you, Cindy and Micah. I'm apparently the one that has the little blue guy that says "you," so you if you want. You know.
That's all right. We can deal with that. Hey, Jonathan, we usually start out the show here with our guest giving us a little bit of history and kind of a brief, maybe not so brief, but a description about where it is that got you to where you are today. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jonathan.
Well, the best thing I could tell you guys, I'm 37 years old. I live about 35 miles north of Los Angeles, California. And when I was about 15 years old, I can specifically remember walking in front of a photography studio in Simi Valley, California, and I just peeked inside the window, and something inside me just said, it'd be really cool to work at a photography studio. And at that point, I barely had any experience with photography at all. And to be honest, all I did was think, oh, that would be cool. And then I just went on about my day and didn't think anything of it. Eventually, digital cameras came, and I instantly gravitated towards one of the little point-and-shoots, which were, I don't know, like 1 megapixel at the time, and they were way overpriced. And so I grabbed basically one of those. I don't know, like a 1 megapixel or a 3 megapixel, and just dabbled a little bit with taking pictures. But honestly, I didn't really gravitate until photography. Until it's actually good that you're a musician, Brian, because I think you might appreciate this. And Cindy, are you guys musicians at all? Do you guys have backgrounds?
Yes. I used to play piano growing up. I used to compete singing. And so music is big in our life. And then we have a drum set in our basement. My boy and my husband each have guitars. I have a piano, and we love to jam. What about you, Micah?
Sounds like a dream right there.
I know.
I've done a lot of musical work in my past, back in high school and just after college, but it kind of became between graphic design and music, and one of them was going to pay the bills and the other one wasn't.
Yeah.
So then you decided to be a musician?
Guess that's the
So I'm very intrigued.
I saw.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
No, sorry, you first.
Oh, I was just going to say, getting back into the introduction that you saw this photo studio, and that was your first introduction to, wow, this photography thing's kind of cool. And then you didn't really pick it up. Again, I think I'm just reiterating, until digital came out, and you got one of the first little funky point-and-shoot digital cameras. And so tell us more from that point on, where things went.
Well, I think I was about 23 or 24, somewhere around that age. And like 13 years ago, I guess, when digital cameras were starting to come out. And I was in a band, actually, at that time. And I played guitar. I met these guys at Starbucks. And it started off with acoustic stuff, and we ended up evolving into playing like the Whiskey, and we played at the House of Blues, and just kind of went to Vegas, and the band was actually just kind of we got to the point where somebody to come out and take our pictures. And so the first thing we did was we actually went to a photography studio out in Pasadena, California, and the photography studio we went to, the guy there was super cool. His name's Charles. Love that guy. He ended up doing a favor for our singer and taking our pictures right there in the studio, and I was just totally inspired by like the lighting, the studio setting, and at that point I did not yet have like an actual DSLR digital camera or anything like that, but it wasn't much later than that we actually went and played a show at the Whiskey out in Hollywood, and we decided, you know what, we're going to need some pictures. We need some band pictures. And so we hired the best band photographer we knew, and her name's actually Kaylee Nelson. If you guys ever get a chance to check out her work, she's amazing. She does some of the best band photography that I've ever seen. So basically, we hired her to come out, and to be totally honest, like, our show sucked. I mean, there was maybe 5 people, and they were way back in the corner, and it wasn't fun. You know, I got like no sleep, and it was like late Monday night, and so, but Kaylee came out and she took our pictures, and it was awesome because she could get right up to the front of the stage and take our pictures, and nobody was in the way, and she got pictures of me, the bass player, the drummer, the singer, and that night at the Whiskey, they had a fog machine with their lights, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen like fog with the colored lights and the guitars. Like, it just looks awesome. And I don't know what it was, like about a week or so later, we got the pictures back, and I just remember, like, I didn't care. I'm a behind the camera kind of guy for a reason, so I didn't care too much about having my picture taken so much as I thought the guitar and the fog and just everything, instantly looked at the picture like, wow. The colors, it was the colors and the fog and the way the fog wrapped around the guitar. Like, I instantly fell in love with photography, like, at that point. That was when I knew that, like, you know what, I have to do this. It wasn't even something that, like, I wanted to do. I realized, like, it was something I had. And so I literally picked up the phone and I called my bass player, and I was like, dude, I'm getting a camera. Like, I have to do this, you know. He's like, do it, you know. So this was actually back in, let's see, my son was born in 2006. I was in the band. We played the Whiskey probably about 2005, I want to say. I didn't actually get the camera until December of 2006.
Oh, okay.
So, are you guys familiar? Are you guys familiar with Canon more or Nikon?
Yep.
What do you shoot,
Well,
Jonathan?
I'm actually currently. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm actually currently shooting with a Canon 5D Mark II, the camera, the body, and my lens choice for macro photography for anything that's larger than, let's just say, a honeybee, I guess I could say, is going to be a Canon 180 millimeter 3.5L macro lens. The reason for that is because that lens is just, it's built like a tank. It's the focusing ring on it is very smooth, and it's extremely sharp, even at like 5.6, which is actually the sweet spot on the lens. For the stuff that's a lot smaller, like let's say a bee or anything that's much smaller, or something that I want to get some really, really extreme detail on, I use the Canon. It's a MP -E 65 millimeter 2.8 1 times to 5 times macro lens.
So now you use tubes too when you're doing something smaller. You're using the extension tubes for your macro, correct?
Correct. And I actually started out with the tubes before I went out and made the investment to get these lenses. So I highly recommend to anybody who's listening, like if you are not sure whether or not you want to be a macro photographer, but you're really interested in macro photography and you want to dabble with it, spend 40 bucks or 100 bucks or whatever you want to get on the tubes. There's all different kinds out there. Just make sure you get the kind of extension tubes that have the contacts that allow you to change the f-stop. You want to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're going to be shooting wide open and you're not going to get the focus that you need. I started out with that. I actually started out with the tubes, and you can get some pretty cool shots with that, and it literally turns almost any lens you have into a macro lens.
So are you now let's back up just a little bit. What took you from regular shooting photography to macro? Because right now your macro is like blowing up, but that's not what you started out shooting, correct?
No, not at all. Yeah, I actually started out shooting bands. That was my favorite thing, you know, because I was a musician, and my whole thing was, you know what, I'm a musician. These guys are musicians. It only makes sense that I go out and shoot what I'm, you know, familiar with. I already know in my mind like what is going to make them look cool because I know what I would want if I was up on that stage. And so I started out shooting bands.
Then he
And then,
decided he wanted to make some money.
yeah, there's no
There's no money in bands.
no, there's no money in bands. There's not a whole lot of that. So eventually I went from bands to doing like family photography. I did a couple of weddings, probably a few weddings actually. That's a whole different animal in itself. I did some.
I think I'm sorry to interrupt right there, but I think this is the third interview that we've done in a row where everybody has said something about shooting weddings.
You
And
know,
I think it gives credit to the wedding photographers, like I believe Brian had mentioned before, because anyone who's shot weddings or is thinking of doing weddings, there's a reason you pay what you pay for a good wedding
yeah.
photographer. Anyway, go ahead, Jonathan. Sorry to interrupt.
You know what? Honestly, hands down to the wedding photographers that are out there, like hats off. There are some amazing wedding photographers out there, and I absolutely respect like everything that they do because it is not easy. There's a lot of work that goes into that.
In fact, there's a saying out there, because I used to shoot weddings, and I believe last year I took my last wedding. I just said I'm done shooting weddings because I can make what I made doing weddings not doing weddings. So I thought, why am I killing myself this way? But there's a saying that once you have a wedding, you shoot a wedding, you have a hangover. You have a wedding hangover. And it's true because
I
you
can see
worked
that.
so stinking hard and you don't have time to drink, you don't have time to rest, you don't have time to eat sometimes, and you are from first from first shot to the end, you're working the whole time. So you
Oh
get
yeah.
home and you're so dehydrated, and a lot of people don't realize how dehydrated you can get just shooting a wedding.
Yep.
And it's, wow. Yeah, it is a nice hangover.
I agree with you 100%. I've literally walked out of there just dehydrated, tired, and you're lucky if you get a bite of food, and yeah.
And that's not where it ends either. And
Nope.
you go home and you have how many thousands pictures, you have to cull through them, and then you have to prepare the ones. I mean, it's a whole process, and it takes time. And there's a lot of wedding photographers that they don't even do their own editing. They edit it out. They send it out.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like every wedding that I've shot, there's basically about a month that goes into each wedding
Oh,
from
yeah.
start to finish minimum.
Now, did you find that you would take a good week or two off of that wedding before you went back to edit it? I
Uh,
know I did.
yeah, no, they're so spread out. Weddings are not my thing, and I tell people that now. You know, it's like I'm glad I got the opportunity to do it, and
Yes.
but it definitely takes a special kind of person who really just loves doing that kind of work. And there's some amazing artists out there that are wedding photographers, and I'm sure
Sure.
I could do it if I really wanted to. I just don't have the heart for it right now. I just don't want to.
Now, how did you go from doing those into macro?
Well, basically, uh, that's a very interesting question. I worked with a lot of people, and I ended up I made a lot of appointments with different people, and a lot of people would flake. And the photography business is a very flaky industry, um, especially if you're not collecting deposits and stuff like that up front. And I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I need a break from working with people for a while. I need to start doing some nature because I still have the passion to do photography. And so I started dabbling with macro photography really for the first time. Um, I want to say sometime in 2014, but I didn't start taking macro photography seriously until about March of this year, 2015. So I really have only been doing it for a few months.
And it's really blown up. I know, haven't you've seen them? I know Mike has seen them in the Photoshop and Lightroom group because we're both admins there still, and we've both seen your work. It's fascinating. It's how close you get, all the granules, and I'm. It's what do you think is your I know for me, when I look at your work, I think that the colors, the vibrancy, and the subjects obviously are intriguing, and then everything. But I can obviously for myself see why yours is blowing up as such a big hot item. Um, but how do you think you've made it on top, or are standing out yourself from other macro photographers? Is that question coming out right? Guys, help me out because I'm stumbling
And
over my own words.
that was a long road to hoe, but I think we got there. Jonathan, what distinguishes your work from any of the other macro photographers?
Well, honestly, first of all, thank you, Cindy. I actually don't try to really compare myself so much to other macro photographers as much as I compare myself to how I was yesterday. I'm always trying to outdo myself,
Excellent.
so, and sometimes that's easy to do because not all my shots, come out good. Some of my shots are not all that great, but then other times it's kind of like, okay, I really got to try a different technique, or I got to try a different angle, or try just something different. I'm always looking for like some kind of creative way where I can be different and just get more detail in a different kind of shot and just really show an insect or a bug of some kind in the way that is going to wow me. And once I see something on the camera, on the back of the camera that I look at and just go, okay, that's cool, then I know I have something that I feel like is worth sharing.
I think that's really a good point that you made, is that you're comparing yourself with yourself. You're trying to beat yourself, not someone else. And I think that's a common mistake that people make in the early days, is trying to outdo the other person versus trying to outdo themselves. So I applaud you greatly on that, and that's wonderful. I have another question before I let the other guys ask questions, because obviously I'm being a hog again. But my question is, how do you decide how to crop your insects? I mean, there's a lot of different rules out there for doing people. Like, you don't do it at the joints, at your knees, or at your ankles and stuff. And you can always break the rules, but there's different reasons why they have those rules. Are there any rules to the insect world? And how do you decide how to do it, or is it just what looks good to you?
You know what? That's a really great question, actually. And I always tell my wife, Amy, that there is really an art to cropping. cropping in itself definitely takes its own level of skill or whatever. It's really important for people to really give a good hard look at the photos that they already have and ask themselves the question, how can I crop this to make it look different? How can I crop it to make it look better? You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you'll have a photo that's just kind of like pretty good or okay, but then if you crop it differently, it takes that same exact image without doing anything else. You just crop it differently, and it takes it to a whole new level. So I really encourage people to really experiment with cropping and rotating and flipping the image vertical, flip it horizontal. I mean, honestly, you got to experiment. Like, you just have to step out of what you normally do. Like, you'll hear people say things like, if you keep doing the same things you always did, you'll keep getting the same things you always got. And that's so true. I mean, you really have to try different things. If you want something different, you got to try something different.
So just to reiterate, you're not just going and taking a picture with your tubes and stuff and this is what you're producing. You're putting time into making sure they get the right angle with your cropping as well.
Well, I try to get as much done in camera as possible correct the first time, and I want to encourage that to everybody because honestly, at this point in life, I've got a lot of things I like to do besides photography, so I don't want to sit there like glued to the computer and you know, hours upon hours in Photoshop and stuff like that. Like, I realize that's fun for people. That used to be a lot of fun for me. But now I just try to get it as close to finished product as possible in camera. So if you can get it right, get it right. And then if you can't, for some reason, get what you can get and then take it to Photoshop. And that's where the artist in you comes out. You know, there's a photographer that's behind the camera who's also the artist. But then you want to make sure that, you know, if you want to be an artist as well, that you're really honing in on your Photoshop skills, and a lot of that includes cropping and other angles and stuff like that.
Awesome. How
All right.
about Micah or
Micah, why don't you go for it, buddy?
Well, I'm just kind of impressed. I mean, I've been listening to the whole thing. You know, coming back from Photoshop World and hearing Glenn Dewis speak on Dewis, yeah, he was talking about, you know, personal projects and getting involved in things, and you echo a lot of the same things he said regarding, you know, drive yourself. I think it is important if we find images that we like to attempt to copy them. Just as a learning procedure, as you know, you mentioned finding your own style, and I think it's one of the ways we do discover our own style. Because I'm not going to look, my images aren't ever going to look just like yours. I've done a little macro photography, and I think finding the focus and getting the focus where you want it, for me is always the difficult thing with macro photography. What's your technique for that?
That's actually a really great question, Micah. I'm glad you brought that up because there's so many different ways you can focus with macro photography. My level of technique, I'm going to say, is it's not really extreme, I guess, but it's a difficult one. What I like to do is I like to set the macro lens in manual. I focus it according to where I think or how big or how small I'm going to want the image to look like. If I'm shooting a butterfly, for example, I'm not going to want to focus it manually as close as possible, so I'm going to back the focus off a little bit, and then I'm physically going to move my body in and out instead of actually messing with the lens at that point. And I don't want the camera to be searching around for the focus point. That's the problem with shooting an automatic focus, is because as soon as you press that shutter halfway down, it's going to be searching, and you might not get the exact spot that you want, and you're going to miss a lot of shots that way.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing to do is to actually physically move your body in and out, and it's a lot more complex and complicated than that. I can give you guys a lot more techniques, but in a nutshell, I would start with that and just kind of develop your own techniques from there. I could definitely tell you some more stuff, though. It just depends on how deep into this you want to get.
Real quick follow-up. Are you using a focus rail for that? A focus rail being so our listeners can understand. A focus rail is a mechanism that you can mount your camera on that actually you can move back and forth into the frame.
No, that's a great question. I don't own one, and 99.999% of my shots are all handheld. So
Wow.
when it comes to shooting bugs and stuff like that, the thing is they're constantly moving. It's
That was going to be my next question. How do you keep them still?
yeah.
Well,
Well,
see, and
actually,
I never understood that, how someone would get a tripod set up for the bug to fly away. I guess I'm
Excellent
trying
point.
to justify tripods, because a lot of people are like, you need a tripod, and I know for landscape and stuff. But when you're dealing with kids and bugs and people, tripods aren't necessarily the necessary thing to have in your I don't know, in your bag, period. And so I guess I'm trying to justify that, and I guess that's a really great point there. Do you ever find a use for a tripod with your macro at all?
I would say a tripod is good for subjects that are either asleep or that are completely still. And it's funny because they actually do sleep. I've come across bees that are literally asleep, and if you gently kind of like touch them just to make sure they are alive, it's actually really funny because a bee will actually stick its arm up, kind of like pushing you away, like, hey, get off me. You
Are you allergic to bees?
No, thank God. I've actually been stung in the neck, straight in the center of my neck, just below
Oh.
my Adam's apple, when I was but I was about like 13 or 12 when that happened, and it was way before I was doing photography. I literally, all I did was walk out of my house, I didn't even get my foot out the door, and a bee flew in and stung me right in the neck. And yeah, so it was more of an annoyance than anything. I just pulled it out.
He knew that you were going to be trying to photograph him someday in the future.
Yeah, and history was
Yeah.
made.
Exactly.
Do you have to search far for your critters? I mean, you have a plethora of bees and wasps and colors um, and subjects. Are these all in your yard?
No, actually, every time I go anywhere, I'll make mental notes to myself, and sometimes I'll make physical notes. I actually write stuff down, or take a picture and like save it, or just go on like Google Earth or Google Maps or whatever, or whatever maps the iPhone has, and then I'll just drop a pin right there, and so I go, okay, I know this is where I got to come back to this time of year because this is where there's some really cool flowers, it's not that way I don't forget. For the most part, I just remember everything in my head, but I'll find gardens that are uh, in public places or at street level. There's actually a couple gardens here in town to where I've actually just gone out there in front of people's houses and gotten to know the people that live there, and they invite me back over and over again, which is really cool. I mean, there's some gorgeous gardens out here, and the people I meet are all super nice. They're really cool. Anytime I take a picture and something comes out good, I always offer to bring them one of the photos from their garden. And it's been super hot out lately, so I haven't been back there in a couple days or probably a couple weeks, really shooting a lot. But I don't know. You just got to kind of look around, and there's no real bugs like right where I'm at, so I have to go looking. But if you look and you continue to look, like whatever you look for, like you're gonna find it.
So some of your photographs, I noticed, like the tarantula and snakes. I mean, those aren't just garden variety critters. So are you actually going to like a store and picking up on some of those?
No, actually, I posted something on Facebook as far as those specific shots that you're talking about. That I was looking for, uh, reptiles, snakes, frogs, whatever. And somebody I know on there, I probably shouldn't mention any names because I don't know if anybody wants to be mentioned or not. I should probably ask them first. But
Sure.
basically, somebody told me that they know somebody who actually has a whole bunch of different pets, and
Got
it's
it.
like a reptile and invertebrate rescue. So I contacted this person, and I just told them, hey, I'd really love to come over and meet you, and I don't know if you have any desire to have photographs of your pets, but I'll get you some great shots. And so we ended up meeting up, and it turns out, yeah, she has like a whole bunch of tarantulas, snakes. That particular snake that you're talking about is actually an indigo snake. That's actually, I believe it's from Florida, and uh, it's an endangered species. But the reason that she has it is because it had a problem with something with its back or with its spine. Something was going on to where they couldn't breed it. And so somebody had offered just to give this snake to her, and when I saw it, I was just like, that snake is gorgeous. I got to photograph that. So
Yeah.
you could try pet stores. It doesn't hurt to experiment. You just got to get out there and try different things.
Yeah. A snake with back problems, I would think, would be a big issue. Um, so, are you now becoming an expert on insects? Has this become a passion of yours now?
Well, I don't think I'm an expert in anything, actually, Brian. I think I'm more of a student of, I guess you could say. I'm still really learning all this kind of stuff. There's a lot more people out there that know a lot more about insects than me. Although my son and I just went to the bookstore today a couple hours ago and did pick up a book on insects. We're still trying to educate ourselves about it. Um, I could definitely, I think coach people on how to get better macro photos, but when it comes to knowledge on insects, especially on a scientific level, I mean, I have a lot to learn.
Okay. All right. I just wondered if this passion for this photography has led into you. I know I have a very obsessive personality, and I'd be wanting to learn everything there is to know about this kind of bug, these kind of spiders, all that. One of the questions
Absolutely.
so go ahead.
Oh no, absolutely. I totally agree. There's so much to learn. You have thousands and thousands of species of different insects, and it's like you just got to kind of pick one and start learning with that. And the one that I wanted to learn the most about right now is actually bees. I love bees. I love photographing them. I have a bee book that my mom actually sent me, and I'm actually just kind of still really learning a lot about them.
There's one of the things I think is really fascinating about macro photography, and it has to do with something being larger than life. I mean, when you can zoom in that close to a bee, a butterfly, the snake, and things like that, and kind of get this really close look that we don't see easily with our eyes, that close at least, and then take something like that and make, a 4-foot by 8-foot print of a macro image of, a bee is just, there's something amazing about it. One of the things I noticed about your photography is how well lit subjects are. And I know that that can be a whole different world with macro photography on your lighting. Is there anything you do or equipment you bring to the table when it comes to taking your photographs?
Well, it all started out actually just using a set of macro extension tubes and nothing fancy. I just literally, let me start at the beginning of this. This is how I figured out the whole lighting process. I went to go photograph my friend's baby one day outdoors at a park, and I mean, it was hot, it was sunny, it was bright outside, and the lighting was just, it was terrible. And I figured, you know what, I got to get these guys in the shade and do something. So I have a large round diffuser. It's probably, I don't know how big it is, whatever the size is. But basically, I was having my friend's wife hold the diffuser just over my buddy and the baby. Either that or he was holding it and she was holding the baby. I have to go back and look at the pictures. But I noticed that the closer the diffuser got to the baby, the better the light started to look
Mm-hmm.
with the sun. And at that, I just had an aha moment. Like at that particular moment, it was a complete accident, for me. I mean, I just knew
Now,
I had to do something about the lighting.
is this a 5-in-1 type diffuser that's with the reflector?
I'm only laughing because it was a 5-in-1, but I've destroyed most of it, so it's it's more like a 1-in-1 now.
No, because I use the diffusing one because in the 5-in-1 reflector, you have your black, you have your gold, you have your silver, you have your white, and you also have the translucent appearing one, which is a white color. And I believe that's the one you're talking about. Is that right, Jonathan?
Totally, yeah. That's the one that you want to use because that's the one that's going to let some light through. It's not so much going to bounce light back, although it can. It's not going to bounce as much light back. So um, now for macro photography, you can use something that big, and you could lean it up against something or like a bush or whatever, and just not have to hold it. You could totally do that. Um, my technique was a little bit more difficult, I guess, to kind of to get down. I literally would get a smaller diffuser that's probably, I don't know, twice the size of a frisbee,
They have
right?
those that are also just 10 inches that you can use.
That's the
And
best
when
one to
you're
use,
using
yeah.
it, it's like the small little bugs and stuff, having that little 10-inch one really works great. Yeah. You can go, they have all different sizes, and you can get these on Amazon. You can get them at your camera stores. We have Mark Commons, Paul's shop in California that you guys can get them at too. B&H, Adorama, all of those can pick up those, and they're wonderful. They're
Absolutely,
wonderful
yes.
for anything outside of macro too. I mean, you don't need to just use them in macro. I used them for weddings. I use them in every one of my shoots, and you guys already know I'm a total fan of reflectors, so that's one of my must-haves in my equipment.
Oh, no, they're great. You could fan yourself off when you're too hot, too, and they work for that.
And you can use them as shade. I've put them over top of me as I'm laying down on the ground and stuff, and working it on some of my macro as well, where I have it covering me and my subject, and it's nice. It's kind of like an umbrella.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you could actually lay those things on the ground, too, to set your camera on while you're, fumbling through your bag, and that'll kind of protect your camera from getting scratched a little bit. So there's a lot of different uses for that. For macro photography, for what I do, the smaller insects, I highly recommend just for ease of use. I would tell anybody who's interested in using a diffuser, number one, get one. Number two, get a small one that's easy to manage, and you want to make sure that it's white. And because I've used a smaller, like kind of a tan-colored one that actually was made to fan yourself off, but it let some light through, and it just was not as good as the white one. You want to use the white one. It has the nice, softest, like best quality of light. Um,
I have a question, and it's going to kind of throw us back a little bit. When you were purchasing and starting, and now as you're purchasing whatever equipment, who do you go through to buy your equipment? Do you go online? Do you go into a shop near you? Where do you like to shop for your equipment?
My favorite place to shop has actually been Sammy's Camera in Los Angeles. It's actually on Fairfax, I believe. It's a 4-story building. It's just one of the reasons I like going there is because that place has so much stuff. It just really gives you the opportunity to kind of like dream kind of big, and pick up different things, experiment. You're not limited to um, just a few items. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff there. If that doesn't work for you, you can go online. But the catch with that is I also believe in supporting the smaller shops too. So if there is a smaller shop and they do have something that you can get there, I would say go for the smaller shop just to support your local community and stuff like that. I tried doing that out here. Unfortunately, the local shop that was out here is no longer in business. Most people are buying stuff, I feel like, online these days.
So with Sammy's Camera, do they allow you to rent some products too?
They do. They have a huge
Do you
rental
know?
department. Yeah, they have a huge rental department downstairs. I've never actually rented anything from Sammy's Camera. I have rented lenses in the past from a place called Canoga Camera out in Canoga Park, but unfortunately, Canoga Park is no longer around. But yeah, Sammy's is great.
I want to kind of get back to that lighting question again. We didn't get to the point where, have you used any flash, strobe, or ring lights?
I've never used a ring light. I actually have used a flash. I still do use a flash. I have a 580EX. Hang on, I got it right here. Let me see. I've got a bunch of Gorilla Tape on it right now. It's got a modifier on it that I custom built. I believe it's the 580EX2 flash that Canon makes. And basically what I did was I took that flash and I made a custom diffuser literally using cardboard. I lined the inside of the cardboard with over the front. I've posted pictures of this online too, so you might be able to find something on my Facebook page. But basically, I used leaf filters, which are the same filters that they use in the movie industry, to put over the windows. My buddy Tom actually gave me some of those, and I put about 4 layers of leaf filters over the front. I don't remember the number. It's probably like number 250 or something like that. And on the inside, lined with tinfoil. On the outside, I just wrapped the heck out of that thing in Gorilla Tape. I really put a lot of Gorilla Tape on there for strength, because if you're going to be out in the wind or, you know, beating that thing up, you want to make sure that thing stays together really well and stays on your flash. Now, the face of that thing is probably about, I'm looking at it right now, I'd say it's the face of it where the light actually comes out from the flash is probably about 7 or 8 inches by about, I don't know, maybe 5 inches or something like that. So it's definitely a big enough surface to more than cover, you know, a flower or a small insect. And anybody that knows anything about lighting, which you just kind of figure out over time, the closer that you get to your subject with the light source, the softer your light source is going to be. Now, it's kind of, it's one of those things where people say, well, what's the biggest light source possible? It's like, okay, well, the sun, right, but the sun is so far away, when you look at the sky, it just looks like a little dot. The best way to make that sun light source a lot bigger is to use like a diffuser and put it right over the top of the flower. I mean, you literally just want to get that thing out of the frame. You want it to be very close to whatever you're photographing. That's going to give you the absolute softest light that you can get. Not everybody's going to want to photograph like that, but as a personal preference, that's the way I really like to do it. My flash acts in the same way because of the way it's set up. I make sure I get the flash very close to whatever I'm shooting. So that's one flash. The other flash I have is a macro twin light, which is the MT24EX that Canon makes. And right out of the box, first of all, it's an amazing flash. It's great for macro photography, very versatile. I do a lot of research when I'm buying stuff. I highly recommend everybody does their research. And the macro twin light, it does put out a harsh light, so you need to come up with some kind of a custom diffuser that's going to soften the light if you want to get the kind of look that I have or that other people are getting with that softer kind of a look. And that also helps to bring the colors out as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Jonathan.
For
Micah,
sure.
do you have anything?
So are you still currently using mostly tubes, or are you using specific macro design lenses and tubes, or how are you doing that now?
Well, I went to, as far as the tubes go, I went to Indiana about, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and a month ago now, something like that, and I used some tubes while I was over there. You'll probably see a few pictures on my Facebook page of like little grasshoppers and stuff like that. Those are macro tubes. But now that I'm back home, I really prefer to use the dedicated macro lens because there's just no real comparison between using, let's just say, like a zoom lens and macro tubes compared to an actual dedicated macro lens, because macro lenses, uh, especially the two that I have, you can get very good quality, very sharp results. And the number one rule I have for people when it comes to sharpness is you can always make a sharp photo soft, but you can't make a
Hmm.
soft photo sharp.
That's very true.
You know, it's really interesting because I had done some macro shooting using my 70 to 200, and someone said, "Well, that's a macro shot," and I consider it a fake macro shot because you're so far back, you're not, but you are getting in. The thing is with a macro, you can get closer to a subject, and it will magnify it. It will focus even if you're close. Whereas with a regular lens, it will not focus if you're too close. I mean, anybody can take and practice with their own lenses. If you have a lens that's just a regular zoom lens, let's say you have the 24 to 70 or the 70 to 200, and you get up really close, you're going to find you're not going to be able to focus in. It's going to be like a little blurry blob. But if you use a macro lens, like Jonathan's saying, you will be able to get in really close to your subject and still have a tack sharp. It picks up all the details, and so that's the difference between the two, and it will make or break the image by if you use that macro. It really does make a big difference and stuff. But the tubes, however, Jonathan, have you used the tubes on your macro? Does it affect how your macro works using the tubes on it?
That's a great question. I've never used the macro tubes on my MPE 65mm lens because I feel like that's a 5 times magnification lens. I could already get way closer than I really need to for most of my subjects.
Yes.
As far
See,
as
I've heard, and I haven't tried, that's why I'm asking. I've heard that if you put a tube on the macro, and anybody, feel free to come into pixeLobby.com on Facebook, or, you know, send us a note and tell us your experience. We'll do a little research on this. Does that sound good, guys? We do a little research on this and maybe play ourselves with the tubes on the macros. But I've heard that if you put a tube on the macro, it takes away from the macro, it being a macro. I mean, you can get in, but it doesn't work the same. There's something. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think part of the reason that it might not, that you get the illusion that it's not working the same, I guess I could say, with a macro lens is because now you're increasing the distance,
Yes.
of your lens, so you have to naturally now you're getting less light to the image sensor. So now you got to get a faster shutter speed, a higher ISO. You're more likely to get image, camera blur, stuff like that, and it's best to use a dedicated macro lens if you can, if you're a serious macro photographer. If you're not a serious macro photographer and you just want to dabble with it, then macro extension tubes are totally the way to go because they're very affordable and it's fun. I mean, it's really fun. Like, you could just go out and take pictures of whatever.
So with your macro lenses, which do you find is your favorite? Because you said you have 2, correct?
I do, yeah, I have 2.
Which 2 do you have?
Well, I have the Canon 180mm macro, and I have the Canon, and that's the L version. I don't know if there's a non-L version. I don't think so. And then I have the MPE 65mm lens. And my favorite would be both, to be totally honest, because I can't really choose one over the other. It depends on what I'm photographing. If I'm photographing butterflies, then I'm definitely using the 180mm. There's no question in my mind. I won't even pick up the 65mm for that. Unless it's a very, very small, like one of those little moth-type butterflies.
Because that allows you to be a little further back?
Yeah, absolutely. It gives a different look. It allows me to be farther back. And the subject is just, I want to see more of the butterfly. You want to see the wings. You want to see the eyes. There's just more. You got to figure out how much you want to see and what you're actually photographing. If you want to see, a bee, for example, they're their eyes and like the detail, then the 65 millimeter is probably going to be the way to go because you can get much closer with that.
So a lot of people out there that are just starting to will often look at your images and say, well, your bug is all in focus and everything is not so focused in back with the nice bokeh and everything. Your aperture, are you open up all the time, or are you closing up and then, I mean, can you get into that a little bit, or are you willing to?
Yeah, absolutely. I have no problem sharing information because at the end of the day, I feel like I can tell you all my secrets and everything I do, but you still got to get out there and do the work.
True.
So basically, I like to shoot at, if I'm using my 65 millimeter lens, let's just say, it can shoot at 2.8, but I don't shoot that thing at 2.8. The best thing I do is I set it at a 200th of a second at f8. If I really want to get something super sharp, if I want to get more in focus, I'll set it at closer to like an f11 or an f14.
Mm-hmm.
And then an ISO 50. I keep my ISO really low. If your camera can't go to ISO 50, just set it at ISO 100. And then, but for settings like that, you're absolutely going to need to use a flash, which is where the MT24EX comes into play. As far as the 180 millimeter lens goes, my settings on that, I try to shoot at a minimum of a 320th of a shutter speed, somewhere around there, especially because everything's handheld. Unfortunately, the ISO with that goes way up, usually because the lighting is not going to be nearly as powerful as with the flash. So my ISO is going to be anywhere between like 800 and 1,000, which is a lot higher than a lot of people are comfortable with. But you know, thank goodness for Lightroom 4 has the ability to take a lot of noise out of the images. You know, so. As far as aperture goes, on the 180 millimeter, I absolutely love shooting at 5.6 because 5.6
Wow.
is the sweet spot on that lens. You would think, oh no, let's shoot at f11 or f16 and get a lot more in the picture or whatever, but 5.6 is where that lens is the absolute sharpest. It's not going to get sharper than that where you're focusing. For the MPE, it's a f8.
Now, do you have friends that have Nikon, and do you know much about Nikon, or do you mostly just stick with Canon? I'm curious because I know we have some thumbs down from our Nikon users, but or our Canon users, but I'm a Nikon person. And I know that I have a 60 millimeter, which is, you have 60 millimeter macro, which is made by Nikon. And I believe, and you guys can tell me I'm wrong later, but I was doing some research and there's a 200 millimeter that I've been drilling over that is a macro for macro photography. And you know, macro lenses don't need to just be used on bugs. Macro lenses are really, really wonderful for portraits as well. I've used them for some amazing portraitures, and my 60 millimeter is one of my go-to lenses when I don't have some of my other lenses. I love my lenses, so I always have my tool belt on. I have my Think Tank tool belt, and it has all my lenses with me, but the 60 millimeters always used in every one of my photo shoots alongside my 20 to 200. Do you know much about the Nikon lenses at all?
That's awesome. Yeah, no, you can get some great shots, some great portraits with that. As far as the, and your work is great, Cindy, by the way. I've seen a lot of your shots, and I don't comment too much on other people's work, but I do see a lot of other people's work in the Photoshop and Lightroom community and stuff like that. And there's a lot of really amazing artists out there. I think you guys are all doing a lot of really good work, so just keep it up.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As far as Nikon goes, I have met a couple of Nikon users. Most people I've met have been Canon over time. Looks like there's a couple more Nikon users. I I have mad respect for people that actually shoot Nikon, because the one time, a couple times that I've actually picked up the Nikon camera, it just seemed very foreign to me. The Canon to me is very intuitive. For some reason, I pick it up and I could just instantly figure it out. With Nikon, it takes me a little bit longer to kind of like fumble around with it.
Well, they do have different platforms, and I think, once you learn, I have nothing against Canon. In fact, at one point, I almost switched over to Canon, and I wouldn't mind owning Canon and Nikon. However, you kind of fall into a rut, and I think people out there will agree. Once you buy one, and then you start buying the lenses and the expenses for the lenses, to switch over and have the other one on hand, you have to turn around and invest in the lenses there. Whereas if you stay within your same company, some of those lenses are interchangeable and it saves you a little bit of money. However, you get your Canon, and Canon runs cooler, however it runs creamier. And it has a really nice creamy texture to it. And then you got your Nikon, and you'll have your richer colors. But in my opinion, and this may just be me, but it tends to be noisier, and when you're editing and stuff, and a lot of that's from the reds and the noise from the red dust or whatever. I just think it's a little bit different. They're just different. They both have their pluses and minuses. But getting back to that, when you play with your camera, you get to know it. It's very second nature as you practice and practice. Would you guys all agree?
For sure.
But learning another one is a little bit different. So for me, I learned on Nikon, and it seems natural, second nature to me. However, I believe if I would have learned on the other, it would have been second nature as well.
My film days were with Nikon during the film days, and then as I got into purchasing my own digital cameras, that's when I started going Canon. And again, I think both Nikon and Canon make amazing cameras, amazing lenses. And you are right, it does get to a point of, just getting used to the menus. And quite frankly, I think it would be, for me, it would be a pain in the neck to own the two different models, to own a Nikon and a Canon, just because I'll go to one and maybe start fumbling through the menus.
Well, and they do reverse it. So there's a difference between the Canon and the Nikon, where they will reverse. It's reversed in your viewfinder when you're noticing the exposure and everything.
Right.
It's completely reversed. So, and I believe Pentax is the same way too. Someone had mentioned that, and they would have to. They had one of each camera, and then they'd be using it in a wedding. They're like, oh, wait, the exposure is the opposite way and stuff. So
I think it's really what you get used to, and again, they're both. I think we enjoy teasing each other about, Nikon versus Canon versus, all the other things like that. But
we all have mad respect for each other, don't you think? Yeah, because all of us, it's the art, and I look at Jonathan's work, and I have mad respect for you. And it doesn't matter if each of us shoot macro or not. His work speaks for itself.
But then there's Micah, and he's shooting something else. We don't know what.
Yeah, we don't know what.
Sony. I still have my Nikon, but I got an adapter for my my new Sony camera, and I'm looking forward eventually, soon, hopefully getting the A7 A7 II, an A7 II, but it's going to take some time.
I'm sorry, I've heard some great things about that.
Yeah, I got to play with it at the Photoshop World, and I'm madly in love.
Nice.
Jonathan, have you had an opportunity to take, I looked at your Flickr account earlier today, once again trying to get even more familiar with your work before we talk. And again, brilliance in colors and saturation. And I just thought to myself, whether, again, it was a bee image or a spider or a slug or something like that, I just thought
I hate spiders, and I loved them.
If I could see it on the wall as, as something like a 4 foot by 4 foot super glossy wet, I think it would just be an amazing looking image on the
You
wall.
can get Bay Photo metal prints. Well, there's more than Bay Photo, but I tend to get my metals from Bay because I like the way that the the mounting in the back of them. But Bay Photo metal high gloss. Oh, and the way those colors would pop. I would put your bugs on my wall. That's saying a lot, Jonathan.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to look into that. I have done a little bit of printing, not a whole lot. I've been focusing more on building up my portfolio right now. As far as the colors and saturation stuff like that goes, I don't really have anything to say about that. It's just kind of like I just kind of do it. I don't know.
Well, and then again, I'm praising it. I'm not saying, because there are some people that we've all seen the photographs where they've gone to the Jonathan Kincaid school of saturation, where they've pushed it to a point where
Hey now, watch it.
Hey, I like Kincaid. I no, what I have a hard time with is, I mean, you really masterfully have done this. Are you using Photoshop to edit with, or Lightroom, or both?
The only time I really use Photoshop is if I'm trying to do some really super fine detailed work. I will literally take one of my images, and this is something that if anybody wants to do some fine detailed work, this is for you right here. I'll go to the navigator on Photoshop. I'll literally blow the image up to like 300 to 500%, and I'll go in there and I'll get rid of any like little dust or anything that just really doesn't need to be in the image. I don't alter any of my insects or anything like that, but I do remove dust that just doesn't need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically what I do for Photoshop. Everything else is all Lightroom.
See, and that's really impressive to me, because I've seen a lot of people, and maybe it's more the newer ones, once you've got your pros, but a lot of people, when it comes to the vibrant colors, they think that it's a saturation of color, and there's ways to do it without oversaturating to the point where the color's leaking into everything else. And so clipping, if you will, your colors, you're not doing that. And I think you're hitting those high contrast colors and the high vibrant colors, and you're hitting it in such a way that it's not bleeding, and you're not getting your banding, you're not getting all the crazy artifacts that a lot of people do because they're not doing it correctly. So kudos to you, you're doing amazing on that.
Thank you very much.
So, Jonathan, what's the end game here? Do you want to work for the Museum of Natural History? Do you want to sell your work in galleries? Where is it that you're going with your photography? And I know we've concentrated so much on macro, but I assume you're still shooting, as you said, portraits and families and other kind of things. But where do you want to go?
Honestly, Brian, all the above. I'd really like to get more stuff in museums. I had one shot that was a 20-inch, it was a 24 by 36 print up at the Kid Space Museum in Pasadena. It's no longer there, unfortunately. I guess they changed up some stuff, and it's no longer there. I just went there the other day. I am in contact with them, though, and we're talking about some other stuff. I would like to get more stuff or prints, period, up at like any kind of other museum. The Getty is definitely on my radar.
What about a book? Are you thinking of any macro book where you have all of your works that we can just ooh and ah for, maybe a coffee table books? I know me and my kids, we would totally order one. My kids would go crazy, and I have 5 kids. They would just ooh and ah over your bugs.
Well, I would say if anybody out there that's listening has a cost-effective way for me to make a book that I can get to a lot of people, then please contact me and let me know, because some of the options I've looked into so far are just going to be too expensive, and I can't see the majority of people wanting to pay like $100 for a coffee table book.
Wow, to be honest with you, most of my, quote, coffee table books are about that price.
True, I would pay a good $50 to $75 for a good one with that work. Yeah.
How much did one of Ansel's books cost us? One of his larger books. I mean, that was almost in the 100, wasn't it?
I guess I'd have to look into that. Right now,
But
like I was saying,
I
it's
think there's
really
possibility of a market for you, which you need to think about the models maybe a little bit more print on demand.
for sure.
Calendars are big, and you can either do it yourself in-house, or get your own printer and create it, or you can find some. We can help find you some options that are available, but I know that there would be a demand for your prints, print on demand, like he said.
I would absolutely love that. Yeah, that would be really great. As far as any ideas you guys might have that you would like to share with me after the
Absolutely.
podcast, yeah, I'd definitely be open to those ideas. I've mainly been focusing on building my portfolio, and I feel like it's getting to the point now where, okay, yeah, maybe it's time to start doing some prints or some books or some calendars or something like that. Back to Brian's question about doing other kinds of photography. Uh, I really have a huge interest in street photography. That's one of my
Cool.
absolute favorite things to do. I love photographing, especially um, like older guys that really just look like they've been through heck, and their face tells a story. You know what I
Whatever, Brian. Jonathan, I saw what you did at the other day, and you posted a black and white one, and it brought tears to my eyes. It was beautiful artistically. It was beautiful emotionally, and I think you would really. I mean, you guys, for those listening, if you haven't seen Jonathan's work, really stop and take a look at it. His work is amazing, but it was quite emotional. That would be awesome if you did that. I would definitely be a fan watching, Jonathan.
Thank you, Cindy. No, I appreciate that very much.
Street photography is amazing. It's I think it's very difficult to make a living doing street photography, but I think these are going to be the great storytellers of the future. And as we look back through history and look at these images of many of the photographers who have focused on, again, street photography, it's going to be an amazing. Like I said, it will be the stories that will be told 15, 20, 50 years from now.
You know what's really interesting on that too is if you look at Micah's, Micah, I chuckled when you talked about your fence posts in every one of your pictures, but I look at it and it is storytelling in and of itself. And if you go back in the future, is that fence post going to be there? Is someone going to have straightened it? Is someone, I mean, it sounds crazy, but I look at fence posts in a new way, and I find that it's the same with street photography, and there's little niches, and each person has their own little niche. And Jonathan, the way you portray it, I mean, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you look at street photography?
Street photography for me is it's kind of there's a very personal aspect to that, but that I'd be willing to open up and share with you guys for a little bit. We've all gone through some hard times in our life and stuff like that, and between the hard times I've been through and like my faith in God, I really believe that people, no matter where you come from, or no matter what you've been through in life, are still people. And I think it's really important for people to kind of understand that, and because you see a lot of homeless people on the streets, especially out here in LA, and they just get passed by, and it's sad and it sucks. And like, you take the time to just go and stop and like talk to one of them, and I guarantee you your life is going to be like forever changed just by talking to that one person. you know and it's something that I actually want to do a lot more. It's just a matter of making the time to go do it. It's not even a matter of do I have time. It's just I got to make the time to go do it. That's what it's all about. But I haven't exactly been homeless myself, but I have gone through a couple of hard times and hard periods where I've come pretty close to that myself. So I can sympathize, and I really want to have some kind of impact on the world through my photography, and I don't feel like I'm going to have the kind of impact through my photography with doing wedding photos or something like that as I can. I feel like I could reach more people on a heart level if they're actually looking into somebody's eyes and just going, wow, like, what has this guy been through? You know what I mean? It's really going to bring about a lot more maybe humility in people and empathy for others and stuff like that. And I think that's something that, is all really deep inside of us, and that we all need to feel that, and a lot of us already do feel that. And I'll do that a lot more than I will with insects or than I will with bugs, or, the bugs are cool to look at. Bugs are amazing creatures, but in the future, I just want to touch as many lives as I possibly can with the stories that other people have to offer and the pictures to go along with it.
I think that that's beautiful, and I think that's really, it makes you even higher in my eyes as an artist because of that. I think a lot of, we've talked about it before.
Not that
Everybody's on their iPhone. And
right?
what?
Not that you think he's high.
No, I don't think you're high. No, but I think that, a lot of people are on their cell phones nowadays,
Yep.
and they pass people up, and you don't even notice what someone's going through or where they've come from. And there's one thing that I've taught all my children is that don't ever judge any person, whether, you hear labels out there. And there's an artist, Richard Johnson, who did a series on labels and people's labels, and it had, slut and jerk and, all these names, and they were like bruises on them. And the crazy thing is that nobody knows where that person has been to get to where they are today, or anything, whether they're a homeless person or whether they're the wealthiest person in the world. Everybody has their own story, and so that is simply beautiful. And I think that'll help bring our generation, or not our generation per se, but even the younger generation that is so full of electronics and games and stuff, back to reality and back to humanity. So kudos again. Very, very well done.
Absolutely. No, thank you. I want to encourage people to try to, just see people as people. Next time you see somebody like that's on the streets, even if you don't have any money to give them, or you just don't want to because maybe you think they're going to go spend the money on drugs or something like that, which unfortunately a lot of people do, just by simply taking like a couple of minutes to like talk to them. I mean, you never know how that's going to impact somebody's life.
Jonathan, I've just done that recently, so I understand completely what you're talking about, where I've spent some time with some young homeless people and understanding their situation and their struggles in life. And I agree with you. Excellent. I myself have thought about perhaps at one point doing a series of photographs of what we see on the roads, on the side of the roads nowadays. A lot of those memorials where somebody has unfortunately lost their life. I always think could be some fascinating and deep stories to be told by some of those things.
Absolutely. Actually, I know of one out here in this area that if you really do want to get into that, I could tell you exactly where it is, and it's a beautiful memorial overlooking the scenery. Unfortunately, I think it might have been somebody on their motorcycle.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, there's a lot of that around right now for sure.
Yep, the human condition is always an excellent thing. Well, guys, we're kind of running here. We've probably done almost an hour. So, Cindy or Micah, do you have anything to add or ask Jonathan here?
I did want to say, you just commenting on something, and when I was in Vegas this past week, it was kind of a rough haul for the first few days. When I finally got out onto the street and actually started seeing human beings, and if you've never been to Vegas, it is a mass of humanity. Mm-hmm. Walking down the strip, every form, shape, color, and everything else coming at you. And I sat down at one point. I was pretty tired, and I sat down, and I was sitting next to a large guy, and he and I, roughly the same size, we talked about started talking about things, and he's one of these guys handing out handbills, questionable handbills on the streets of Vegas. If you've been to Vegas, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it kind of occurred to me, what is somebody like that like, and what's their life like? And so he and I started to chat, and of course, an older fellow, he's probably Brian's age, and he's been doing this job for a while. He's has an ex-wife he's dealing with. He's living with his mom, and I'm just there's a story there, and a human being, not just a guy handing out questionable handbills. And he's doing this for probably minimum wage. It's like 90 degrees at night on the street.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And this is not a healthy situation. And just connecting with him as a human being was an interesting thing for me. And I think I think that's an important thing as photographers. I'm a landscape photographer. Sometimes I kind of distance myself from humanity, but I see that street photography as a way of making that connection, and I really applaud you for your work on that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that landscape photography and macro photography, you are, in a sense, through your art right there, distanced from other people. Yes, that's true, but at the same time, as soon as you upload any of your images to the public eye, now you're finding other people who can relate, and it's kind of actually. I mean, for example, if I wasn't photographing bugs, I wouldn't be talking to you guys right now. You know what I mean?
That's true.
So it's.
And if Cindy would leave you alone, I keep messaging him. So, Jonathan.
I'm very thankful for that, by the way. So thank you very much.
Well, we're thankful you said yes. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, Brian.
All right. Well, Jonathan, once again, as we kind of wrap up the show here, any last words of wisdom or advice to us who want to go photograph bugs?
That's a great question. Basically, Brian, what I would say is anytime you get the chance, pick up magazines. You have macro photography magazines that are on the book stands. Read through them, see what other people are doing, educate yourselves. Don't be afraid to ask me questions on Facebook. I'll answer as many as I can. I have no problem with that. As long as I have time, I'll try to get back to you. I apologize to all the people out there who have asked questions that I've missed their question and I haven't gotten back to you. I would experiment as much as you can. Read books, read magazines, watch tutorials on YouTube. YouTube is amazing. It's an amazing resource. You could really learn a lot. And just be yourself. You know what I mean? Like if you have an idea that you want to try, like try it. What do you have to lose? You know what I'm saying? Like if you want to photograph, forks and silverware and stuff like that, try that. It doesn't have to be a bug. Just get really good with stuff in your house. As far as lighting goes, experiment with different kinds of lighting. Do a Google search, photography lighting, and see what you can come up with. And then kind of get your own thing that works for you. If we have an opportunity to do another podcast down the road, I'd love to get more into the details of the lighting and like different things, and a little more details on my technique. I know we didn't really get into that a whole lot this time. I definitely would like to share that with you guys though, because I think it would be great to. Technique is so much of my macro photography. It's how I approach everything. And I will throw a gold nugget your guys' way right now as far as my technique goes. If you want to get sharper shots, if you want to get anything that just has the perfect focus that you're looking for, as good as your camera and your lens will allow you to, set your camera to manual mode, set your settings, put your lens in manual focus, and then physically hold the camera in one hand, and if you can, the flower or whatever it is in the other hand, and then bring them into focus with each other and then you could twist the flower that way. You can hold it exactly where you need to get the exact focus that you need. If you have to, try and balance your camera on your fingertips and your arms while you're holding the flower or whatever. It's kind of hard for me to describe without actually showing you guys. That's why next time we get another video podcast, I'd like to be able to show you guys how I do this kind of stuff.
Well, and you know, everybody, Jonathan Willner is one of our artists on pixeLobby.com. If you go to pixeLobby.com, go to where it says artists, click on that. It will bring you a list of all our different highlighted artists. And these particular artists on there have the ability to write blogs and posts and videos. But there's a post on there that shows all of their links to their sites, to their how to reach them, Facebook, whatever information we have, and it will also show you whatever blog posts they have. And I believe Jonathan's going to be writing some blogs for us on macro photography, so please visit there, and he might have some videos. We might be able to get some videos together for you of him doing his thing, right, Jonathan?
Absolutely, and you know what? I'll be totally honest with you. I've never written a blog before, so bear with me on the writing as far as that goes.
It's all good. And we would love to see your street photography there too.
Sure.
Anything of your work, we are happy to promote you. And if you want to visit with Jonathan too, and you haven't gone to his Facebook page or whatever, feel free to come to pixeLobby at Facebook and please ask him questions. Reach out to him. You'll be able to tag his name and say, "Hey, Jonathan, what about this?" And you'll be able to reach him there, and we can start some fun discussions there as well. So
do that, and also if anybody has a very specific message, they get lost in the comments section of any places, feel free to send me a private message. That way I know that I could find you on there, and I don't have to really go searching through all the comments and you know.
Excellent. All right. Well, Jonathan, again, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate that. Absolutely, we can follow up with a more technical version on macro photography. I think that would be excellent. And all of these links as well will be in the show notes, as the pixeLobby podcast is now available for download through iTunes. And actually subscribe to the show so that it automatically will download to your whatever you have hooked up, whether it's to your desktop, whether it is your smartphone or tablet. And we've already had some comments about people have found it very convenient to listen to the show on their morning walk or something they're doing like that. So it makes it very easy for that to happen. Cindy, thank you so much. Micah, I appreciate you coming along and being part of the panel. And this show will be out on September 28th, I believe. And again, I want to thank everyone for listening, tuning in, subscribing. And remember, take a picture. It'll last longer.
Absolutely. Brian, Cindy, Micah, thank you guys very much. I appreciate you guys having me out. It's been great to meet you. Sorry there's no video of me this time, so you guys get to see the little blue thing. But you guys have been awesome. I really appreciate you guys having me out on this, so thank you very much.
all right.